today I will give a talk about GraphQL in Ruby. And why this talk? Because recently I had some interviews in the company and not many people knew about GraphQL and they were kind of confused that I need to learn GraphQL to be a Ruby developer or to develop in Ruby. So this is a talk to show that you can do GraphQL in under 30 minutes in Ruby. So that's the main purpose of the talk. About myself, my name is Octavian. I'm a Ruby developer since 2016. I'm first a co-founder with Max over there. You can find the link of our company there. And before, I used to work for Josh, Me and Pigmel, two other small SAS companies so very small companies. I haven't worked in a big company, so I'm not sure how development stuff is done there. So, okay. As I mentioned, GraphQL is a way to build APIs. And the question is, why do you need GraphQL? The main thing is that REST, like APIs, it's a big problem with overfetching and underfetching. Like you never can get the right data that you need for your stuff without having to make a custom method or a custom endpoint that gives you just the right amount of data. So let's say, for example, that you want to make a list of products, a table of products. The only way to get this in REST is to get an index with all the products and get everything about products that you can have in your system, which is way too much than what you need. So that's one of the problems. And another problems with REST APIs is underfetching. Like for example, you have products with pictures and you want to put pictures inside the tables, right? So picture is a different endpoint. So in REST would require you to have another endpoint, product/pictures/an ID over that. And to get pictures, you need to query to query these APIs for each product individually. And that will result to an N+1 API calls, which slows down development, slows down page load, slows down everything. So GraphQL tries to solve this problem. And another annoying things with REST is that you have endpoints for everything. Every little thing requires you to have an endpoint. So GraphQL tries to solve these problems. So what is GraphQL? GraphQL is a query language for reading and mutating data in APIs. What does that mean? That every query in GraphQL is like this. You have the query and the variables for that query, and you make a post request to the server, and the server returns you data for your query. That's it. So there is no other endpoint. There is nothing else. And in the query language, you specify what data you want from the server, and you only receive that data. You don't receive any extra data. And okay, so on the back end, what you need to do is to resolve your query and to define types of data for your query. And you have two types of operations: query and mutation. If I talk too much or I stop, you can stop me and ask questions, please. Okay, so this is how front-line query. You have the top query over here on top. This is the top query, and you may have variables for these queries or may not have. And then you start listing the fields you want from shop. For example, you want the ID, you want the email, you want the phone, and you may want your active subscription. And again, this one also has a list of fields, and in here you see that you have another step forward. So you just define the list of things you want. In here you may have an array of data. You can also get array of data, and each of these would have their own fields. So on front end, like I said, it allows people to request the data they need, and the query is written in a JSON format, so it's easy to make the query after you get a little bit of use. And you can query multiple data at the same time. You can query shop, you can query active subscription, you can also query the themes for the shop. So one query for all. You don't have to make multiple queries to get all the data you need to make your page. And this is the other operation that was something that you query to get data and you mutate to change data on the server. These are the only two kinds of operations allowed in GraphQL. And the operation is just a query but has mutation name. So you just specify it's a mutation and you resolve it in a different way than a query. But this is the only difference. You have the same thing. You have the query and you have the data you want to receive at the end of the query, and you also have the variables later. And how does this look on the backend? So how do you define your types in the backend? Because this is something that you have to do for any sort of APIs. What do you return? What can the server return to the front end? So in GraphQL, you do this by defining types. You define types for each model you want, or for each stuff that you want to return. And the good thing about GraphQL is that it is a type system, so you have to define the type of the value that the field can take. So here this is a string, and this is for coming from Ruby. This is very useful because you know you from the start what sort of value your API should return and what sort of value you should have, and it's also strict, so you cannot return an integer here, it has to be a string. So in here you define your fields, and you can also have date types, you can have composite types, and you can also have arrays of joint types. So a team has a team type, and subscription also has a subscription type. And you can also say if it can be null or true, and if you return a null type for something that is false, it will throw an error, so the API will know, the caller will know that I did something wrong. That's not something wrong happened here. Okay, so how do you set up the backend in Ruby? Because we are Ruby developers, not really interested. We just know how to set up the server. And like everything in Ruby, you use a gem. For everything, if you don't have a gem and you have to make everything yourself, then the technology is not worth using. And there are a couple of gems to set up servers, to set up GraphQL servers. The most common use is GraphQL Ruby. I think it's made by the GraphQL team, and it's quite old. It's 7 years already. They still have recent development, so it's the GOAT library. And the second one is Agu, which it's high performance Ruby with some GraphQL server support. I think the support for GraphQL is added recently in the last year or last few years. So it's not a very I'm not sure about it. I work only with GraphQL Ruby, so the other two are just new gems that you can try beside the first one. And this one, it's a recent gem, I think started last year. It's Ruby like DSL for GraphQL in Rails. So these are the three options that you can build your backend in Ruby. Okay, so let's talk about the first gem and how to set up the Rails server. So you just run this command, and then you get all the stuff you need to start writing the GraphQL types and make queries. So you get your GraphQL route, and you get your GraphQL controller, your schema file, and your base type and base mutations. And then you can start writing stuff, and you're kind of done. So let's see how the GraphQL controller looks like. What does the controller do for everybody? Authenticate request, and then you set up the context for your GraphQL call. So things like shop and admin, over here admin and request can get passed to each query and each mutation. So these things that not like you not put the shop or the admin ID in each request. You would have a shop type, and then this will get passed by the request by the context over here. And then you just execute the admin schema and with the variables, context, and the operation name. And this is everything that happens in the GraphQL controller. So how does the query type? So query type, this is a special type that one has to define to define all the top level queries. So everything in GraphQL is a query. So and you have a top level query. And in this file you put all your top level queries. So in here you have the field admin, which will just return you the context admin. And from here, from admin, you can have admin and you have field ID, and then you have some other stuff in there like action that you did or a log or something else. And in here you have a field with a parameter, with an argument, and it's the one we saw before, the shop with the parameter. So this one will return the shop and we'll find the shop by ID. And then all the fields are used from shop type in here. You have to define your shop type to get all the fields. And the other type that one has to do is the mutation type. And in here defines the mutation and where to find the mutation file. So this is the mutation name and the file where it needs to be done. Okay. And how a mutation looks like is types we saw before, the query types we saw before, it's the shop type. And the mutation looks like this, where you have the list of arguments and you have the type of the argument, if it's required or not, and extra validations if you want to do so. Another good point for GraphQL is that it comes with input validation that you don't have with REST API. With REST API, you can send everything in there and nobody cares if your input is right or not. With GraphQL, you can have this from the start and the query gets rejected immediately. You don't have to do model validations to see if your data is correct or some sort of validations. And the errors are standard. Okay, so you have a list of arguments, and then you have a list of fields to return, of possible answers to your mutation. Like typically you have an error or field. If something happened, you just return the error. And in this case, you have the shop ID, so you can assign the ID to shop after you made the mutation. And these fields have a value null because they can be null. Like in case you have an error, there's no shop ID, and in case you have the shop ID, there is no error, so the type of these are null. Okay, so I think that's about it. So, like I said, building a GraphQL server in Ruby is quite easy. You just take the gem, install the gem, and you follow the instructions. You make your types, and then you start making queries. The type system offers great scalability because once you define your type, you don't have to care again if you need this type to be used in a different place. Like the shop type can be used anywhere. The admin type can be used anywhere in your stuff. You don't have to retouch it after you define it. When adding an extra field to the type is just adding an extra line in that type definition. Because you only have one request for your page, it reduces HTTP traffic, and because it have only the data you need in your requests, it again reduces the amount of HTTP traffic. The strict type system, it's a bonus that REST APIs don't have, so everything is typed, and for Ruby, I think that's a very good thing to have. And yeah, mutations into validation can replace or augment the model validations. And yeah, you simplify routes and reduce the amount of controls because you only have one controller, the GraphQL controller. So all in all, I think it's a good opportunity or a good thing to try the GraphQL. And one more thing, this is not for everything. Like you should not use GraphQL for every sort of things you need to do. In our application, we use GraphQL for 3 different endpoints, but other endpoints they still use a REST-like API. Like if you want to make an OAuth authentication, you cannot use GraphQL. You just can use an OAuth, different controllers. So this will not replace everything, or not say that from now on everything is GraphQL. No, it's just a tool that you need to use if you want to make a robust API that gets you what you need in as fewer as possible requests. Some keywords that you have to care about here is that it doesn't have a preload by default. So if you may have backend n+1 queries, n+1 queries, if you're not careful. So for those things, you can use different gems to lazy load your data and load everything in one request. But this is not part of this thing. And yeah, so about us, we are a small SS company, and these are our links. You can click on them and follow us on LinkedIn or visit the website or app stores. Any questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry. So I understand that by using GraphQL, it can save HTTP request, right? So,
Yes.
so for example, instead of taking a product category as an example, so instead of making the first request to get all the product category and then subsequent request for getting
The images.
the product under each category, right? So the consumer of the GraphQL, they can make a single request to get both of the category and the product.
Images, yes.
But on the other hand, would it make any impact in terms of performance? Because let's say if we have a fixed set of the REST API, we know that what we expect to return to the user, so we can do some optimization for that, right?
But then you would need to do this optimization for every page you kind of want to do. Otherwise, you still return more data to the server, so it will still increase the HTTP request, and you still make more requests, right? Or you make a single request to get all the products with all the images at once. So you make a new endpoint, or you use REST-like APIs where you have each individual model has their own endpoint. How do you solve the problem?
Yeah, I get the drawback of the how do I say REST API when it's not that flexible, right? If the user if they want to get all the data they need, possibly they need to call multiple REST API endpoint.
Yes.
But I mean, when we give the flexibility to the API,
I don't know. So flexibility-wise, they're both the same. REST and GraphQL they solve the same kind of problems. Just that this one makes it faster because it's only one request. So each request it takes time to connect the server, time to communicate the servers to make the DB calls. All these things adds up. So in theory, making one request it's faster than making multiple requests.
Yeah, but
in theory, I mean, it may be cases where the connections is quite okay and the stuff tend up to something the same thing, but in practice, making one request is usually faster than making multiple requests.
Yeah, I get that point. I just it's just unclear to me that because we in GraphQL we allow the API consumer to specify all the attributes they need, right?
Yes.
First the product, then they can also require to fetch all the images, right?
Yes.
So we can't control it's quite hard to predict which attribute the user will get in a single API request. Right? So in that case, let's say if they specify they get both the product and all the images, so would it affect the performance if we use GraphQL?
No, I mean, if you don't handle n% queries, then yes, it may affect the performance. But if you handle everything correctly and the gem does it for us, then it's the same thing. Like everything is preloaded, so you have as few queries as possible. So in the end, you minimize the amount of queries to DB, and everything gets written in one go.
I want to add something. So, like Octavian said that you can request all the data with one request, but actually you don't have to. You can still split into multiple GraphQL requests. So if we talk about some extreme example of, say, you need to like send 200 REST requests to just build one page, right? So with GraphQL you can split it. Like you can make one request and get all of the crazy amount of data with one request, but you can also split it in, say, like 10 different requests, right?
Or even 200. I mean, you can make the same thing if you want to. Like, it gives you complete flexibility of how many requests you need to get the data.
Yeah.
I think what Long trying to say that if I'm a malicious party and I meticulously craft a long nested multi-level, like say 10-level nested query, will it blow off your database?
Well, everything it's like, as a developer, why would you have 10-level nested of anything?
No, but
it's
from the client side. You cannot control that.
But you control the query, so everything is controlling the schema. They cannot go more than what the schema allows them to go to.
Yeah, but let's say I have a schema Facebook,
I mean, it is possible to have that level of nestiness, but Again, I don't think that will have any other different effect than making the request separately.
Yeah. I think it probably would just time out the server, right? It just run for a while and then time out server.
Yeah,
And
of course, you can always have you always have a timeout.
Yeah, but
on the
what I'm
server.
trying to understand is if, like in the spec or GraphQL or in the library, do we have any like, let's say like protection mechanism for it? Possibly.
I'm not sure.
Oh, and one more thing. Can you back a bit to the part when you specify the schema, like the tag, the model, kind of?
Yes, yes.
Can we, do we have a way to like specify the relationship here?
So this is kind of the relationship, right? So this is a model, right? So if you have a model type in here, it will automatically get to the model or something else. And then you have the fields, and here you have relationships, right? You have teams, and you have an array of teams. And in here, this is a single type, and you have a single type in here.
So,
and you can also do data. You can also return something very slick. You can return a JSON or table. I don't have a JSON. So you can also return a JSON for something that should be a type in GraphQL. If you don't know how it looks like, you can always return JSON.
So, if this is just my theory. If I request for shop and I nested a theme, like I guess the old theme for shop. What ideally it would do is it would join the query, right?
No, it will preload them.
I mean,
it
join
will,
as in like SQL or
I don't think it will join. I think it will take the shop, and then it will take the teams for the shop, and then that's how it goes. That's why I said in here you may have n+1 queries if it's not handled properly, because you may have in here another type, and for that you have backend n+1 query. So for that you need to lazy load your data. You need to use a different gem to solve that problem. Like for your example, if you have a special endpoint that gets all the products with the images, you usually preload the images, right? We have a preload on the query. In here, they don't have preload unless you make your query special. Like you can make a top query and then you preload all your data that you need to. But that's just stupid, I would say. So in here they have a mechanism to lazy load, to load all the data only when you need them. So all the models in here, they're loaded after the query is processed. The system knows what it needs to query. Somehow it's, I try to look into the gem, and it's a bit over my brain, I would say. So they make a list of what they need to load, and then they make a query for that thing to the DB, and then they go again to the data that they may need, and they make another query for the DB to get more data. So it's done in batches. Like it's not everything is loaded at once. And of course in here these fields, they can also be defined on the spot. Like you can have an owner that you concatenated from phone or email or something like. These are not only DB fields, right? They're just anything you can have in here. Maybe it's a better example here. I don't have it. Don't think I have in this example. Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, just one last question. So you said that you are using both the REST API and GraphQL in your system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from your perspective, what are the possible use case for REST API and GraphQL?
So the reason I use the REST like API, if you need to return HTTP, if you need to return HTML. Mm-hmm. So for those cases when the request needs an HTML, you just return using HTTP, using REST like API. I mean, not REST like API, control different endpoint, not GraphQL endpoint.
So your company using monolith or microservice architecture?
I think it's monolith.
So the GraphQL on the same server,
Yes.
but backend and frontend recipe.
Yeah. I mean, the backend is everything on the one server and everything on the other.
What I'm trying to understand here is, can you shed some light on what is the possible trade-off here? Because everything is trade-off, right? So what specifically we sacrifice?
Like you mentioned, you may make a query that is too big to be handled and needs to be split. That's a trade-off. Right? Like when you make a query, you should think if this is possible. Like if you want to load 100 objects, and then from these 100 objects you need to load another 100 some deep level, like you said, then I would suggest don't make that sort of query. Split it up.
But we never encountered that.
Yeah.
Like you're the developer, right?
I think it's better for front-end because you find a schema
Yes.
and you can be used at the front-end side. Like
Yes.
the
Like the schema is available on the front end, and the front end developer knows exactly what he needs to query and how it goes.
Schema is like a recommendation.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in strong favor of like stricter interface or API, so
Mhm.
you can use like open API like specification for it. So if you have GraphQL, it's great.
Yes.
You mentioned that we can only use post, right? So
It's only a post request, yes. Everything is a post request. So I mean, there's only one endpoint and one request to do. And for front end, there's a lot of libraries to make the request for you, to make GraphQL request. But you can also use the simple fetch request, like for one of our libraries. Use a fetch API, like use the window to fetch to make a GraphQL request. You just make it like the way I showed initially, where you have the query and the variables, and you make it to JSON and you send as body, and that's it. So,
I think one possible trade-off that I'm really trying to nitpick here, but I guess if you use Post, you kind of forego all the infrastructure around caching that Get have, right? It's kind of unusual that you use HTTP cache for API requests, but I've seen you do it using ETAG or stuff to
yeah,
do
you
caching.
don't have caching here, like everything.
So you just like let off all the caching.
Yeah.
That's probably not a big deal, but
Well, for API, I'm not sure that you
Yeah.
really want cache, because everything should be live, right? It should
Yeah.
not.
I mean, I used it once, like use ETAG to cache like user information, stuff like.
And
we do that
most
just-
clients, they have caches on there, so many times the query doesn't even go to the server. They use their own cache.
Oh, fine.
So the client does the caching for us.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know really about if I define a field.
What?
The function it's like a total activate hour to go. I have to query in a lot of tables to calculate this, and I define in the side. So if I not query, I in the client not query this that field. So the server they have to include the field.
Like if you don't, like I think if you don't have it in the query, they just ignore it. They don't trigger the method. Like if this one, for example, is a method over here, define, created, add, and count something. If it's not part of the query, it's not used. It's not code. So they only, like everything is lazy. So everything try to see what you need, and at the end you make the least amount of choices that you need to do. You don't do anything extra. That's the idea of backend. And like if you want to build your backend yourself, it's gonna be complicated, because you need to do like you said, you should do everything as little as possible. You should avoid doing unnecessary things, and for that it's complicated.
I want to add something. So I just remember something about your question about the mechanism of how to prevent queries that are too big. So we actually don't do that, but Shopify somehow does, they calculate points for each query. So, so
You have the, yeah, so, but this is not part of GraphQL, it's part of API rate limitations. Like you can add the rate limit to your API, and of course you can add points to how big your query is, and if it's too big, you can.
yeah, but somehow they evaluate how complicated the query is, and they assign a certain amount of points.
They give 1 point for each field.
For each field? Okay.
Yeah.
So and then you can only query a certain amount of points.
That makes a lot of sense. I think Facebook have something kind of similar to it. I remember when I do like Facebook API requests, they have a specific amount of quota that
Yes,
you
so
can
everybody-
hit, and that point is calculated based off like
The
your
queries.
like, actual usage. But I think the approach is a bit different than Shopify. They actually like measure the resources. I don't know how they do it, but they actually measure the database resource because I have different query. I have the same query but two different shops, and because they query to a different shop, they have different complexity, right? You have shop with 1,000 items, and you have shop with 1 item. They specifically calculate the correct, like not correct, but like the proportion is kind of like makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to make a nice rate limitation, then yeah, you kind of need to see how costly a query is and assign points to it, and then try to limit it and try to reduce the amount of points someone can use. And you can always give a bigger ratio to big shops or to small shops. Like you can always do what like Facebook does. But just depends on the way you want to build your API limitations. Like you can also have the leaky bucket, which is the most used. You can make a request every 5 seconds.
Yeah, I guess the problem Mark want to raise is different queries, different requests have different weight to it.
Exactly.
So using limit bucket, probably, I mean, you can weight
The leaky
your
bucket
requests.
it's a bit weak, but in here anyway. So there's I think that there's a bit of annoying. Like you're gonna select the whole shop.
Mm.
So if you want one field or 10 fields from the shop, I don't think it makes that much difference in a way, because I don't think from what I saw in there is no select on the fields that you actually get from DB. You get the whole model on in GraphQL with the gem. So if you get one shop, you still get all the fields from DB, but the front end only gets what you request. So DB side is still not optimized. It's still not optimum.
But is there a reason for them to do that?
I think it's complicated. Like you need to know all the fields that are necessary to calculate everything in your query, and for that because you may need some fields from shop that are 5 levels down of your query, right? So
I mean, in theory, they can still.
in theory, it's possible to do a select also on the fields from the shop, but
Yeah.
from what I saw, I don't think it's done at the moment in the gem. Maybe in the futures they will add it.
But I think the game is not like worth it.
I don't think it's worth it. That's like it's too complicated to calculate. Like you need to finish everything. Like you need to go through all your fields or your methods to see what you need. And of course, there's much more complicated stuff. You can also like this is just basic. You can do much more things than here. You have connections. You have a lot of different things that are not specified. This is just the basic usage of GraphQL. And what can you do?
One side question: can your editor like leverage these info? Like they do suggest that because you now have data.
Yes. So for front end, most of them they do. I personally don't use it, so I don't have any example in here. But if you watch other people's videos, then you see them doing and showing you exactly what field you need to do to make a query. It's very nice. It's nice to build a query. Okay.
Move to the slides implementation.
I'm sorry, I think we will exceed the time limit. Right?
Let's do the quiz.
I can always answer.
Yeah. So we need to wrap up everything on time, not too late, so people have time to rest.
Okay. the quiz or?